World Meteorological Organization, Petteri Talas, Robert Stefanski, the Chief of Applied Services at WMO, and Maria Neira, Director of Environment and Health at WHO, who is joining online. I will first give the floor to our Secretary General, who will be addressing general aspects of the heat waves at the political, economical level. And then Bob Stefanski will update us on the current situation and the forecast. And finally, Maria Neira from WHO will address specific issues relating to heat wave and health. First, I want to give the floor to our Secretary General, Petteri Talas.
Thank you, Brigitte, and thanks for coming to this press briefing. As you have heard, we are supposed to break records during the coming days, and also today we have actually already broken the all-time high in UK. There was 39.1 degrees at 11 o'clock, and we expect that the temperatures may go above 40 degrees today, which of course will be also the new record. And these heat waves are becoming more frequent because of climate change. It was clearly demonstrated by the recent IPCC report that we have seen this happening worldwide, and that's a consequence of climate change. I have been using analogy to sports. When sports persons are given doping, they perform even with a higher intensity than normally, and we have been doping our atmosphere by injecting more greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide, to the atmosphere. And this heat wave is observed widely in Europe. We have seen forest fires already in southwestern part of Europe, and in Portugal, for example, they have been reaching 47 degrees, and they are also having severe forest fires. And these heat waves are having impacts on human health. We have already seen a couple of years in the past when we saw casualties. In 2003, there was a heat wave hitting Central Europe with about 75,000 casualties, and in 2010 there was a heat wave hitting Russia with about 50,000 casualties. Now we have better means to adapt to those changes, but especially those same people who have been vulnerable to COVID pandemic, they are also vulnerable to heat waves. So we expect to see increased deaths among the old and already sick people. Then we are expecting to see also major impacts on agriculture. During the previous heat waves in Europe, we lost big parts of harvest, and under the current situation where we are already having this global food crisis because of war in Ukraine, this heat wave is going to have a further negative impact on agricultural activities. And thirdly, these kind of heat waves are becoming more and more frequent in the coming decades. The negative trend in climate will continue at least until 2060s, independent of our success in climate mitigation efforts, and that means that these kind of weather conditions are becoming more common, and in the coming decades it's going to be milder than the normal climate. And if we are successful, we could seize this negative trend in around 2060s. And in Southern Europe, this kind of events are having also negative impact on tourism. It's not very comfortable to come to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece once the temperatures are above 40 degrees, and that's also a big part of the economies in many of those countries. But our experts will say a bit more concerning how are the real numbers. But so far we have broken all-time high in UK. We haven't yet broken all-time high in Europe. In Sicily last summer we had 48.8 degrees, and so far we haven't been exceeding that number yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Now I have the pleasure to give the floor to Robert Stefanski, the Chief of Applied Climate Services at the World Meteorological Organization. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Brigitte and colleagues. So as we've been talking about, the heat wave is continuing. We're expecting the peak to be today across France, UK, possibly even Switzerland. Again, Professor Tallis talked about the UK records falling. Again, also in Portugal, Spain, and France, very high temperatures. One thing we're looking at is breaking records even across the continent. Yesterday, the Portuguese Weather Service mentioned a report of 47 degrees Celsius. Professor Tallis talked about 48.8. So as you can see, and that was only last year, so our concern is that this is happening with shorter time periods between these records. Likewise, in France, also expected to be the hottest day of the year. Temperatures to be above 36 to 40 degrees Celsius across the eastern half. Out of the 96 departments in France, 86 are under heat wave alert. And the question everybody's asking, looking ahead, when will this end? Unfortunately, looking at all the models from our partners at the national and regional level, possibly not until middle of next week. And again, continued high temperatures for most of Europe. Again, we expect this peak to happen right now in the Western Europe and move eastward, but still temperatures will be much above normal. And again, we talked about the record temperatures in Sicily and in Greece. So that previous record in Greece was set in 1977. Again, it was broken last year, and we're approaching that this summer. As you recall, in June, we also had a heat wave event. So this is only mid-July. We have about another 30 days of summer weather to go. So we'll see what happens in the next 3 or 4 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Maria Neira, Director of Environment and Health at WHO, who will be addressing health-specific issues.
Thank you very much, and a pleasure to join you today. I am in London at the moment, where the Mayor of London, together with the World Health Organization, is hosting a solution summit on air pollution and climate change. So as you can imagine, being in London today at 41 degrees is so exceptional. You see that the fatigue, you see people struggling with this condition, and they are not prepared and adapted for. Essentially, what we are concerned in WHO in terms of how this will be affecting human health is because of this heat will compromise the capacity, the ability of our body to regulate our internal temperature. And this can result on a cascade of illnesses, starting with obviously heat cramps or heat exhaustion or heat stroke, hyperthermia, and of course, changing on behavior. You will have a very strong impact as well. We are seeing more and more on mental health or certain aspects that people will feel very much affected by this heat and not having the capacity to sleep properly. In addition to that, obviously, people with previous chronic conditions, kidney conditions, or people working outdoor, we are very much concerned about the workers outdoor being exposed to very high temperatures and maybe without the adequate equipment or preparation to cope with that. As you can imagine as well, the health system will be challenged by this, what it could be an increase in the number of people going to to look for health facilities and health assistance, and that will be compromising as well. Of course, you can imagine that accidents can occur more often, particularly in terms of occupational workers, I mean, on the working environment, because you have less attention, you have more fatigue, you have exhaustion, and you don't have the same capacity to react that you will have in normal conditions. The most vulnerable will be obviously the people with previous chronic conditions, old people and very young people as well, children and pregnant women. That's why the recommendations are very logical. We want people to, whenever it's possible, to stay on a cool environment. If you cannot have a cool environment, make sure that you don't have physical activity very intense. You keep very much hydrating yourself. Obviously, do not exercise and and protect yourself with adequate clothes. And if you can afford it, go into a place where you can have air conditioning for at least a couple of hours a day. Avoiding and having shadows whenever it's possible, and making sure that you don't drink alcohol because that will accelerate. The other thing that we are very much concerned is that when this heat wave coincide as well with high levels of pollution, and therefore that will exacerbate the respiratory, cardiovascular, in general diseases and condition. And this is a major concern as well for those big urban spaces where the cities are not well adapted to cope with these high temperatures. Of course, the best solution to this will be, again, being very ambitious on tackling the causes of this global warming. We have been alerting for a long time that climate change is affecting very much human health, and therefore taking measures to reach the zero carbon and accelerating the transition to clean renewable sources of energy, stopping this whenever possible and as quick as possible, the acceleration to renewable sources of energy, non-polluting sources of energy will be extremely important. I think this is a good call for all of us that there is a need to tackle the causes of climate change that we have been alerting the scientific community, and many others have been alerting for a long time that this is extremely important. So I hope that not only we will adapt and prepare our cities to cope with the heat waves that are becoming more and more frequent. There is a figure that is very dramatic, but we need to put on the table. In 2003, only in Europe, we have, as mentioned already by Professor Tala, 70,000 deaths. And now we know that the number of people exposed to heat waves is increasing. Only in 2017, it increasing by 125 million people more exposed to these heat waves. So again, adaptation, response as well, and coping with the heat waves, and the best we can as individuals, but as a society, we need to make sure that we take measures to accelerate this fight and tackling the causes of climate change. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Maria. And now we will open the floor to questions. Please address your questions to our Secretary General, Petri Talas, in priority, because he will have to move back to the office for a live interview for the BBC very soon. And then we will take questions for the other two experts. Yes, Christophe.
Christophe Vogt, Agence France Presse. Thanks for taking my question. You were talking about, or you have been talking about the effects of climate change for quite a while now, telling people that this is going to be dangerous, that the temperatures are going to go up. I remember many press conferences like that. Do you think that this heat wave, this effect is now finally going the one that is going to change the minds? And second question is, what can we do to mitigate, like telling us that, you know, this will not go down before 2060. I understand that scientifically it's important, but on the other hand, it doesn't give us much hope. So what can we do to mitigate individually, but also on a larger scale? Thank you.
Yes, so as I said, these kind of events, they're becoming more frequent, and this negative trend will continue for the coming decades, and of course we have to adapt to climate change. That's also very important, and we have to make sure that we have enough facilities where people can stay in cooler conditions, and since this 2003 heat wave, many countries have improved such facilities, and also we know more about the health risk related to this kind of events. So we have better means to mitigate, but of course, because these events are becoming more frequent, this problem will be also worse in the coming decades, and we will not be able to return to the current or the previous climate. And at the moment, we are heading towards something like 2.5 degrees warming, and that means that we would have much higher amount of these kind of events in the future as part of our normal climate. And these kind of events have been also wake-up calls for human beings. Once meteorological community started talking about climate change, especially in the 80s when we started establishing IPCC, it was seen as something theoretical, and most people didn't believe in our scenarios, which we have been able to demonstrate that they are now taking place, and the fact that we have started seeing impacts of climate change worldwide, that has been a wake-up call for decision makers and growingly also for the private sector companies. So this awareness is much higher than it used to be, and luckily we have also better means to mitigate. It was demonstrated that we have in energy sector good means for climate-friendly solutions. In transport means we are going to have more and more such means available, and also in our everyday diet we can favor more vegetarian diet, for example. So the means to solve this problem and also the prices related to this mitigation, they're getting lower.
Thank you very much. Any other question in the room? Yes, please.
Thank you. Our Globo TV in Brazil, and Brazil is now suffering with high temperatures. Even it's winter there. So could you make a relation between the extreme weather in Brazil here and climate change?
Yeah, we have seen this global climate change, which has had an impact on global temperatures, on global precipitation patterns, and melting of glaciers and sea level rise. That's happening, and that's also affecting Brazil. But in Brazil, besides that, you have also affected the local climate by cutting your rainforests, which has had an impact on local rainfall conditions and humidity conditions, and also temperature conditions. So this deforestation in Amazonia region has had a boosting effect on local climate, and your climate has been getting drier because of that, and also hotter, and this deforestation has also had a negative impact on the global carbon dioxide concentrations. Amazonian rainforest used to be a sink of carbon, but the most recent studies have shown that it's at least partly a source of carbon because of deforestation. And this is also related to the diet. With this deforestation, you are growing, for example, more soybean for the cattle, and that's again a good reason to reduce the consumption of meat.
Thank you. And just to note that we will release on Friday our State of the Climate Latin America and Caribbean, and you will find more figures and statements about that. If no one else in the room, I want to give the floor to Jamie.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for that, Brigitte. Professor Tallás, I just wanted to follow up on what you said earlier and about what Christophe also mentioned. You said that these kinds of heat waves are becoming more and more frequent in the coming decades, and the negative trend in climate will continue. What does that mean exactly? I mean, you mentioned that that last year there was a record in Sicily. There's a new record in the UK today. Are we going to see yearly records, new records, pretty much every year? Do you think? Is that what you mean by a negative trend? And just if I could also follow up on the 2060 forecast, is that new that you expect that it's going to go until 2060, or is that based on new data that or old data that you've had? Thank you so much.
Sorry. Thanks to climate change, we have started seeing, we have started breaking records nationally and also regionally. And for example, last year we broke all-time high in Europe, but we also broke all-time highs in Spain, Turkey, and Canada, thanks to the impacts of climate change. Of course, we will see also this natural variability, which means that we are not going to break records year by year in a single country or single region, but the direction is clear. And in the future, these kind of heat waves are going to be normal, and we will see even stronger extremes. We have already pumped so much carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that the negative trend will continue for the coming decades, and so far we haven't been able to reduce our emissions globally. We have seen regionally good progress. For example, European countries, United States, Japan, Singapore have been able to reduce their emissions during the past 15 years, whereas in Asian countries we see this negative trend continued, and emissions are still growing, and therefore we haven't. It's not sure that we would see the peak in 2060s if we are not able to bend this emission growth development, especially in the big Asian countries, which are the largest emitters today. And what was the other part of the question? Could you repeat the other part of your question? I forgot that.
Jamie,
yes,
can you repeat the second part?
Sure. Yeah, it was just about the 2060 forecast. Is that based on a new data, or have you known for a while that that this negative trend is going to continue until then?
Yeah, it has been known. Of course, we were hoping that the peaking of the emissions would have taken place already earlier, but we have seen the reverse happening, and we have started seeing a fairly rapid growth of the emissions, especially in several Asian countries recently. And we could seize this negative trend in weather patterns by mitigating, but we have already lost the game concerning melting of glaciers. So we expect that this melting of glaciers will continue for the coming hundreds of years, or even coming thousands of years anyhow, and also sea level rise will continue for the same period. That's good, bad news, and that's because we have already reached such a high concentration of carbon dioxide.
And the reason, if I could just follow up on that, part of the reason I asked that question was because you were seeing a number of countries going back to the use of fossil fuels. They're sort of, because of the concerns about fuel shortages and whatnot. Is there any way to judge whether or not that kind of return to fossil fuels is going to have an impact?
Of course, we may see two types of development during the coming years. In the short run, for example, European countries which have been highly dependent on gas import from Russia, they have to comfort their energy need somehow, and it's likely that some European countries may use more coal to produce enough energy. But in the coming 5 to 10 years, there's a chance to reduce our dependence on fossil energy more, and that's in the positive. That would be the positive scenario, and that's also likely to happen, that we will we will speed up our reduction of use of fossil energy, at least on a European scale. And since we have seen this Russia dependence and related impacts on financing of the military actions, there's a possibility to speed up climate mitigation efforts and start comforting the energy needs much more with renewable energy and also with nuclear energy. So that's likely to happen, at least in Europe, in the longer run, 5 to 10 years from now. But for the coming couple of years, it may be that we will use more coal to comfort the energy need.
Thank you. A question from Paula Duprat.
Yes, hi, thanks for taking my question. Yeah, this is for Swiss Info. My question is about the upcoming World Cup in Qatar. As we know, a big fossil fuel supplier. As we know, the date was shifted, but there have been issues with the World Cup being held there in the middle of the summer. It's now in the fall, but nonetheless, I'd like to know, get your thoughts, Professor Thallas, on the signal that it has already sent to be hosting this global event in a country that is supplying a huge amounts of fossil fuels that are generating, the carbon, and of course having a great impact on global warming. Could I have your thoughts on that?
Yeah, of course, these oil and gas producing countries, they are producing this energy because there's a demand of such energy. So without the demand, it wouldn't happen. And it's for us who are living in the rich countries, we should look at the mirror, because we are consuming those resources. If there wouldn't be the demand on our side, there wouldn't be a market for such sources of energy. So it's not fair to blame those who are selling this kind of energy, but we as consumers, we are also responsible for that. Of course, it's going to be a major challenge for Qatar type of countries if we seriously will reduce the consumption of fossil energy in the future, and it's a question how they will be able to carry out, keep the current level of current standard of living there if the income of fossil energy ceases. So that's a good question, and it's not an easy question for Qatar type of countries.
Gabriela Sotomayor.
Yes, hello, thank you for taking my question, Professor Thallas. What about the governments that seem to forget about these heat waves in the summits? Do you think that if they were in London today, they would sign the agreement? Thank you.
I hope that these kind of events are going to be a wake-up call for many governments, and I hope that also in democratic countries, this kind of events will have an impact on voting behavior, and in democratic countries, it's up to the governments what kind of policies they are having, and it's also important that we have worldwide act and for example how we handle import from countries where the basis of energy is, for example, very much coal. That's a good question, and that's something that at the European Union level is on the agenda today. So they are thinking whether we should start taxing coal and coal fired production of goods. So this is also global trade issue, and it's also global carbon taxing issue.
Gorgi from Soleil de Dakar.
Bonjour, merci beaucoup pour d'accord, ma question, je pense que je vais la poser en anglais. Il comprend le français ou bien?
Je peux traduire si vous le souhaitez.
Okay,
s'il n'est pas trop long.
Okay, Secretary General, thank you for being with us today. My question is simple. Do we have the same heat tendency in Africa like as we have right now in Europe? And the second question, I see you are very nice with a nice shirt and a tie, and some people are asking me as an African living in Europe, did I feel the heat? So sometimes I was, okay, what I have to say to them. So how you should give us advice to dress in that heat season? Thank you.
Thank you. So as I said, the IPCC report that was published last August was demonstrating that we have observed an increase of heat waves worldwide, and that's also covering African countries. And in African countries, the heat waves means also negative impact on agriculture, because once we have a higher temperatures, we have also more evaporation, and that's a bad news when it comes to yield. And I'm happy to wear this kind of ties at these kind of events, which is demonstrating what we have seen happening in the climate for the past 150 years. So you can see that in the past we had much more blue color, and more recently we have seen more red color, which indicates that the heat waves have become more frequent. Thank you.
Now we have Christiane from German Press Agency.
Thank you very much, and merci Gorki. I was going to go into the same direction about your dress code. I salute you for having short sleeves and no jacket. I lived in Singapore for a while, where this is the dress code for government ministers because it's a hot country. I wonder whether you have a message for politicians in Europe and their dress code, because they seem to, and not only politicians, but many guys in Europe seem to think that even at this heat, it's necessary to wear a tie and a jacket on top of the shirt. Maybe you have some advice for these people, and that might also be a message, you know, if you see your politicians in short sleeves, that might also be a message to people about climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a question a little bit out of my core competence, but this dress code that we are having today, it's coming from the era when the room temperature indoors was much lower, so perhaps 10 to 15 degrees, and then it was worthwhile to wear that kind of jackets. And here at the press conference room, we are having perhaps 37 degrees as is the outdoor temperature here in Geneva today, and it's more comfortable for the functioning of the brains to wear this kind of clothing. So if you are very disappointed with that, I'm sorry for that.
We will take a last question for our Secretary General, and then he will have to leave, from Emma Farge.
Good afternoon. You mentioned the glaciers. I was wondering if you could talk about the bigger impact of melting glaciers. What do you expect that to be in the future? And is this the opportunity to start naming heat waves? What would you name this one? Thanks.
And that's a good question. So as I said, we have already lost this glacier game, and if we look at the statistics for the coming decades, we have seen glacier melting intensifying, which means that we are having less and less water in the mountain glaciers worldwide, and we have also started melting the biggest glaciers in the world, especially Greenland glacier. There has been a major boosting of its melting, and also the Antarctic glacier, where we have the biggest ice mass worldwide, has started melting. And we are going to see both local impacts and global impacts because of that. The global impact is going to be sea level rise, which has been already boosting. So 20 years ago, sea level rise was about 2 millimeters per year, whereas recently we have seen 4.5 millimeters per year sea level rise. And this is very much coming from this speeding up of the melting of glaciers. And this is having global impacts on island states, low-lying areas, big cities which are on coast, also in London, where you are, Maria, at the moment. But besides that, we are going to see local impacts. Many of the big rivers worldwide, they are having their origins from mountain glaciers, and because of the shrinking of the glaciers, we are getting less and less fresh water to the rivers, which has a negative impact on agriculture, on human water availability, and also for industries, and that's happening also worldwide. And we have major glaciers in Himalayas, here Alps, then we have Andes, and then Rocky Mountains in Americas, and in all of those cases, that's happening, and this will mean bad news for the coming decades, and also for the coming centuries. For example, here in Europe, we expect that the mountain glaciers will mostly disappear by the end of this century.
Thank you very much. I think you need to go.
Yes.
Sorry about that. And Bob, maybe you can answer to the question on naming heat waves. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So we have a good collaboration with WMO, and WHO, and a number of the national weather services around the world. We have something called the Global Heat Health Information Network, and also a joint study group looking at this issue. And so currently, there's no plans, at least for WMO or our partners, to name heat waves. Heat waves are not like tropical storms. I mean, these tropical cyclones or storms are very specific and very discrete. So there's caution. We advise caution on trying to use this for heat waves. Specifically, naming heat waves causes additional challenges. The named events may not take place. They may turn out to be less severe and may not occur in different localities. So again, the definition also of a heat wave may vary. So trying to do that is quite difficult. I know a number of the weather services, especially Météo France, tries to characterize the major heat waves by year. And thus far in the climate community, we've been able to identify the major events across the world. And as this current event shows, nations, the weather services, and national health authorities are doing a very good job with health warnings on heat waves and making people go to shelters, and the measures that Maria talked about earlier. So currently there's no plans because it's a very difficult issue, and we don't see a way to make that the public messaging very clear on naming heat waves. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Now we can open the floor to any more scientific technical question. Yes, please go ahead, Christoph.
Thank you. The question is for Dr. Neera. I was just wondering if you have an idea or an estimation of the number of victims that a heat wave like the one we're experiencing right now can make in terms of heat, but also, as you said, pollution. And if you maybe could elaborate a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are having now very daily notifications of the number of deaths country by country, but we don't have a final figure. But if we know that in 2003, as I mentioned, the figure was very dramatic, 70,000 deaths, even if now maybe in terms of early warning and alerts, we are better prepared and the cities are much more on the proactive search for those cases and releasing awareness raising messages for the population. I'm sure that will be a big figure. But again, I think we need to use this very strong signal that again we are receiving for accelerating our action to look at the causes of this global warming and these heat waves. And although we need to adapt and prepare better our cities, because cities is where probably we will be having more problems, and they need to take at the urban level many actions to adapt ourselves, and the cities are not prepared at the moment. We again, the call is for responding to the very acute situation, but looking again at on a very serious and ambitious way tackling the causes of this global warming. Climate change is affecting our health in many ways, not only by the heat waves, which are a direct consequence in the number of diseases and conditions and that is causing, but as well because it will be touching the pillars of our health, the access to food. We will not have a good agricultural production, access to water. There will be water scarcity for sure. There will be more diseases transmitted by vectors because of the weather conditions. There will be a crowded situation in our cities and heat stress. And there will be definitely migration and social inequities and problem with our quality of the air we breathe, which is already very much affected. In terms of air pollution, as you know, at the moment, according with our standards, 99% of the global population is breathing air that is not respecting the proposed standards by WHO, the air quality guidelines. And therefore, we would like to see as well less dependence on fossil fuels combustion, because this is putting at risk our planet, our climate change, but at the same time causing major pollution and therefore affecting on a very important way our health.
Thank you, Emma, and please mention to whom you direct your questions, if it's for Maria or for Bob.
It's sort of for both. I was hoping they could elaborate a bit more on the health challenges with the pollution. So that one would be for Maria, but maybe for Bob. Do you have any data on the deterioration of the air quality due to this heat wave, or could you elaborate a little bit more on the trend that you've seen? Thanks.
We don't have any data at the moment. But as we do know, again, if anybody flies or goes up in elevation with any mountains, even in Europe, you can see the less, a lot of, less visibility in the air. So I don't have any data. Again, this is cumulative effect, and Maria knows, can talk more about that. But again, under these events, the air becomes very stagnant, and actually the air is coming down to the ground, and that traps all these pollutants and also makes for the heat wave. So I'll let Maria maybe answer more questions on that, but we don't have any specific data right now. Again, as you can anticipate, it's a current event, so we're trying to get some of the data and the air quality measures as we speak. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. I agree. I mean, we have data about the levels of air quality in most of the cities around the world. There is a very good monitoring system in many cities, and particularly in Europe. So we can know the levels of air pollution every day. But now how this interact with the fact that the heat wave and data about that will be cumulative, and we will see. But for sure, the people with chronic respiratory conditions, this heat wave will aggravate and exacerbate this situation. And for cities that are very polluted, the fact that in addition to the pollution, there will be this heat and high temperatures will certainly make the respiratory conditions, the acute ones, more serious. In the medium and long term, this is what we are very much concerned for. How long an individual is exposed to bad levels of, high levels of air pollution, and then we can estimate what it represents for the health of the people. But we see an increase on the people demanding the health system, an important increase of people seeking for assistance at the healthcare facilities, and the health sector is much more demanded these days when there are peaks of air pollution and heat waves.
Just to follow up, no, I didn't have any specific data for the current event, but Maria's quite right. In fact, if you look at the Meteo Swiss app, there are links to air quality apps and other websites. So it is very much connected, weather, climate, and health across many of these sectors. So I just didn't have actual numbers for today or this week. But as Maria said, there's a good network across the world on this. Thank you.
One more question from Gabriela Sotomayor.
Yes, thank you for taking my question again for Maria. Going back to the dress code, now that you are there in London, I think the Queen's Guards are wearing these iconic uniforms in the sunshine. So isn't it dangerous for their health? What can you say about this?
Sorry, Gabriela, I couldn't hear the second part. They are wearing what?
I think they are wearing these iconic uniforms, the Queen's Guards.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
under the sun. So, this is an example, but it's an important issue because they are there in the heat wave with these uniforms. So, what can you say about the dress code in these seasons? For the people.
Gracias, Gabriela. Yes, this is an issue that we are looking at under the occupational health standards. As you know, there are some recommendations now for outdoor workers, and that will include this type of guards, or even very recently in Madrid as well, one of the cleaning outdoor workers, they were wearing a type of clothes that definitely will even increase the body temperature. So we are issuing recommendations about occupational health standards for outdoor workers, and that's very important. How much the guards and the very heavy traditions will be receptive to changing that, but definitely if we are seeing this trend in terms of increase on the heat waves, our dress code needs to be adapted to that, and we need to review the quality or the type of clothes we are using, and making sure that it will be more adapted to the situation we are facing. The traditions, we hope that can be changed as well.
Thank you very much. I think there are no more questions, so we will wrap up. Thank you very much for attending this press briefing. We will keep you updated. If you're interested in the naming of heat waves, we have published this morning an article on our website, so you can get some additional information there. And the channel is open also with me. Don't hesitate if you want to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.